Hey everybody, it's James here from GoodGuitarist.com, and in today's lesson, I want to show you the 8 chords that you need to know if you're a beginner playing acoustic guitar. These shapes make up the foundation of guitar. You know, the entire system of how we understand guitar and the fretboard, all the theory, concepts, and everything else is based on these 8 essential chord shapes. If you want some written materials to go with this lesson, I have all of that included in my free ebook. It's completely free for all my subscribers, and it has everything that you need to get started on guitar and playing songs as soon and as easily as possible. I'll put a link in the corner and I'll put a link down below so that you can get your copy. Anyways, out of these 8 shapes, 5 of them are major, happy major chords, and 3 of them are minor. The 5 major chords are C, A, G, E, D. That spells the word caged. And then there's 3 minor chords, A minor, E minor, and D minor. And you'll notice there for A, D, and E, there's a major version and a minor version of each, but for C and G, there's only a major version. Well, there are minor versions of C and G, but they're a little trickier to play, so we don't include them in the basic shapes. In fact, there are 12 major and 12 minor chords, and at least a dozen ways to play each, and it all ties back into these 8 chords that I'm going to show you right now. Anyways, let's start with the lesson. I'm going to go in order of how tricky they are to play. Out of these 8 shapes, the easiest one is E major. And to play E major, first we're going to take a look at our fingers. You're going to be playing chords with your non-dominant hand. So for me, I'm right-handed. I play chords with my left hand. My fingers are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is my index, 2 is my middle, 3 is my ring finger, and 4 is my pinky finger. And we'll start by taking our second finger, that's our middle finger, and we're going to put it on the second thickest string. So we have the thickest string, the E string. We go over to the second thickest string, which is called the A string. And on the A string, we're going to go to the second fret. See these boxes here? The first box, that's the first fret. The second box, that's the second fret. And we're going to put our middle finger down on that string and fret, the second thickest string at the second fret. And we want to put our finger as close to the fret as possible, closer to your body within that box. You don't want to go over the fret or it'll kill the note, but you want to be just beside it. And now we're going to take our ring finger, our third finger, and we're going to put it underneath our middle finger. It's going to go on the same fret, the second box, the second fret, but on the next string. And this is called the D string. And finally, on the next string, the G string, that's from the thickest 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to put our index finger, our first finger, and put it on the first fret. And, that's kind of where it wants to go, when you're just putting it down there. So we're holding down these 3 spots on the guitar, and we're going to make sure that our thumb is in a good position. We don't want it too high. We don't want it too low. It should be centered behind the chord. Maybe you'll want to bring your elbow in and adjust your shoulder and, pay attention to your thumb and the whole support system. You're going to want to arch your fingers, have them nice and curled. If your fingers get lazy and droop, they're going to mute the adjacent strings, and that's not good. We want those strings to ring out. Open. Open means you're not pressing it, but it's still ringing out. So in this case, we're pressing down those 3 strings, we're arching our fingers, and then those other strings, they can ring open. So we get our fingers nice and curled by lowering our thumb a little bit, sitting up straight, tilting the guitar neck upwards, and then we can strum the chord and see what we get. And don't expect too much of yourself. If it sounds awesome, if every string is ringing clearly, great. If it's not, it's totally normal. We could even test the strings by plucking each one individually, just starting at the thickest and just seeing what's working and what's not. And then we readjust and we try again. There's a whole process to it. It's going to take several days of practicing, and this is what you have to get used to when you play guitar. So be easy on yourself. But definitely put in the effort. I have a troubleshooting checklist in that free ebook that I mentioned earlier. So check that out if you want a method, a systematic way to help you clean up your chord shapes. Either way, that's the E major chord. Now the next one I want to show you is the E minor chord. And E minor, it's really simple. We're going to take that E major shape and then we just remove our index finger. And that's the E minor chord. And one other thing that I want to show you with this shape, right now we're playing it with our second and third fingers. And depending on the song, you can play it with those two fingers, or you can play it with your first and second fingers. And let's try that. We're going to put our first finger on the second fret of the A string, and that's the second thickest string. Then we're going to put our middle finger just underneath it on the D string. And we want them as close to the fret as possible. And that's the other common way to play E minor. And which shape you use depends on what chord is coming before or after it. As a beginner, I recommend just picking one and getting really good at it first, and then learning the other way when you need it. You'll see practically everyone using both of those fingerings interchangeably. Once you get used to it, it's really easy to just use either one. I just wanted to give you a heads up about that because you will see people using both of those fingerings for E minor. Anyways, that's E major and E minor. Now the next one I want to take a look at is A minor. And we'll start out with our E major shape. And now we're going to take that entire shape and we're going to move the whole thing over by one string. So we just move it down. That's it. You just move it over, and this is A minor. And that's the exact same shape as E major, but we're pressing down entirely different spots on the fretboard, so it makes an entirely different sound. And this is a great exercise to just play A minor and E major back and forth. You just go back and forth, going down and then back up for E major. And with just those two chords, you can do some really cool sounding stuff. Now from this A minor shape, we can move our ring finger over to the third fret of the A string. That's the third fret of the second thickest string, and that makes a C chord. And when we move that finger over, we're going to have to do quite a bit of adjusting because with the C chord, just take a look at this part of my hand right here, my palm. When I'm playing my E major, E minor, and A minor chords, my palm is at an angle. Whereas when I'm playing C, my palm is parallel to the fretboard. And by pivoting our palm like that, it lets your ring finger reach further up the fretboard. And you're going to have to be mindful of your thumb the entire time with all these shapes. That's so important. You want your thumb to still be pointing upwards. Don't let it trail off to the side. And that's another really good exercise on guitar, just switching from A minor to C and getting used to your hand shifting. When I'm doing that, my thumb is like that for A minor, and then when I play C, it comes out a little bit, and then it goes back a little bit for A minor, and it's pointing up the entire time. C major is, in my opinion, the hardest of all the basic chords to get it to sound right. You really need to arch your fingers in order to make everything ring clearly. I've had a few students who, for whatever reason, they got all the rest of the shapes, no problem, but C took a few months for them to get. And these students were totally normal people. They moved on to learn to play bar chords and finger picking and all this great stuff. They turned out to be great intermediate students. But C, for whatever reason, was a huge challenge early on. And, I just want to let you know that you shouldn't worry about it. This is one of the trickier ones for some people, but it's a great exercise for improving your technique. So it's good to start early on this one. Anyways, that's half the shapes. Now from this C chord, I'm going to lift up my ring finger, and then I'm going to take my two remaining fingers, my index and my middle finger, and I'm going to move them down once again. So now my index is on the thinnest string at the first fret, and that's the high E string. And my middle finger is on the third thinnest string, called the G string. And then I'm going to put my ring finger down on the third fret of the second thinnest string, just in between those two on the B string. So this is called a D minor chord. And a quick note, for some people, instead of using their ring finger there, they use their pinky finger. For me personally, it feels a little bit more comfortable, but other people use their ring finger. It's totally up to your physiology, whatever works best for you. And D minor to C, that's another really good switch to do. You just move those two fingers back and just use those two fingers to guide you as you switch between them. That's why I'm doing them in this particular order, because if you do them in this order, it's a good way to memorize them, and it'll be useful since these switches show up in songs all the time. So C to D minor is really good to do, and you can also practice going from D minor to A minor. You just move the entire D minor shape over, and then you suck in your ring finger. And then you move your A minor shape up, and then you just poke your ring finger out. That's another really good switch to do. Anyways, from D minor, we're going to switch to D major. And this is going to require us to completely change our fingering, even though only one note is changing. That's something really important to know, that the major and minor shapes are just one note apart from each other. When we were playing E minor and E major, I'm just changing one note. That note on my index finger, that's the only thing that's changing between major and minor. Well, that's also the case for D minor to D major, or for, any major and minor chord with the same name, but it's a little more complicated with this one. We want to take this note on the thinnest string that we're playing with our index finger, and instead of playing it on the first fret, we want to play it on the second fret. That's the note that we're changing. But if we just try to do that, it works, but our hand's kind of upside down, and it kind of violates all these, ways to play guitar comfortably. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave our ring finger down. We're going to put our middle finger on the second fret of the thinnest string, and then our index is going to go on the second fret of the G string. So we swapped which strings those fingers are on. And for me, it makes like a little triangle. That's a good way to remember it, especially when you're getting started. Anyways, let's make this shape from scratch because it's such an important shape. It's so common. We're going to begin by putting our index finger on the second fret of the G string. And then we're going to put our middle finger on the second fret of the thinnest string. So that's our first step, is we get those two fingers on the second frets of the thinnest and on the G string. And then we just plug the hole. We put our ring finger down on the third fret of the B string. Same place it went with D minor. You'll notice that, these two are the same spots we were playing. It's just that one note that was changing, but we had to change our entire fingering in order to make it comfortable. And one thing that you'll want to note here with D minor and D major is you might want your thumb a little bit higher, because we're putting all our fingers on this end of the guitar. Our thumb is kind of going to be on the opposite end to give us the proper leverage. So my thumb's just poking out a little bit. And another thing to note with these two D shapes, you want to make sure that the thickest string isn't ringing out. And at first you'll do that by aiming for the top 4 strings as you strum. But the more you play guitar, the more you'll realize that it's inevitable that when you're strumming, you want big, consistent motions. And that means your pick is going to brush the thickest string, and it's not going to sound so great. So to avoid that, we can take our thumb and we can put it over the top and we bend it so that it lightly touches the thickest string. Sometimes some people's fingers are a little too short for that, but I encourage you to try reaching. The more you practice, the more dexterity you'll develop. Sometimes you'll think it's impossible because your fingers are too short, but with just the right adjustments, almost anybody can make it work. Anyways, I just want to make you aware that muting the thickest string is critical on a few of these shapes, especially D major and D minor. Now from D major, we can leave our third finger down, and we can lift up our other 2 fingers. We're going to put our middle finger on the third fret of the thickest string. And with the D chord, our thumb was a bit higher. Now we're going to have to lower our thumb to help our middle finger reach that thickest string. And then we're going to put our pinky finger just underneath our ring finger on the third fret of the thinnest string. So everything's on the third fret. Our middle finger's on the third fret of the thickest string, and our ring and pinky are on the third fret of the 2 thinnest strings. And that's good enough for a G chord. You could play just like that. But we can also add our index finger to the 2nd fret of the A string, and that completes the shape, especially if you're finger picking and doing other stuff. You want to make the full shape. For strumming, that's excellent, but for everything, this is better. And pivoting from G to D, we want to pivot off of our ring finger. That's a super important switch. There's so many songs that go from G to D. It's the most common chord progression ever. Those are the first 2 chords in it. I would spend a lot of time going from G to D, just leaving your ring finger down, adjusting your thumb, and making each of those shapes. And now let's go back to D. There's one last chord that we haven't done yet. From our D chord, we're going to leave our ring finger down once again, and we're going to slide it to the 2nd fret. And then we're going to stack our fingers on top of each other, all on the 2nd fret. So I'm putting my middle finger just above my ring finger on the G string, and then my index finger just above that on the D string. And like with all of these shapes, we want to be as close to the fret as possible. But with this chord, the A major chord, the way that we stack our fingers, we just can't get all of them next to the fret. It's pretty much impossible. So we just have to accept that our ring finger is going to be in the perfect spot, but our middle finger is going to be a little further away. Our index finger is going to be even further than that. But we get them as close as we can. We curl our fingers the best we can. And that's the A major chord. And going from A major to D, that's another one of those super important switches. We leave our ring finger down, slide back up to the 3rd fret, make our D shape. Then we lift those 2 fingers, slide our ring finger back to the 2nd fret, make the A shape, and we want to go back and forth between them and get really used to that. So that's it for the shapes, but I want to transition from A back to E major, just so we can complete the cycle. To do that, I'm going to lift my index, then I'm going to move these 2 fingers over to the A and D string. So I just move them over 1, 2 times, and then I add my index back where it belongs, the 1st fret of the G string, and that gets me the E chord. So now that we've cycled through this whole thing, let's practice all 8 of these chords in a circle. We start with E. We remove 1 finger to make E minor. We're going to go back to E, and then we're going to move it down for A minor. We move 1 finger to make the C shape. And remember to adjust your thumb. Your palm is going to pivot. We lift our 3rd finger, we move it down, and then we add our 3rd finger back to the B string to make D minor. 1 note changes to make D, but we have to rearrange. We pivot off of our 3rd finger, our ring finger, to get into the G chord. Back to D, and then we slide our ring finger down to the 2nd fret. We make A. Lift our index, move over 2 times, and we're back to where we started. And this is a good start, but the real way to actually learn and internalize these shapes is to learn songs. And you'll want to learn 2-chord songs and 3-chord songs that are going to use these chord shapes. And I have a whole playlist with like 30 of the easiest possible songs on guitar. I'll put a link in the corner, and you'll find links to all of this in my free ebook, as well as an entire guide to doing this. So at this point, I think you should go through these shapes like we just did in this lesson, just to familiarize yourself with them, to memorize them. But from there, learning some easy songs is by far the fastest way to actually internalize these shapes. And if you want a guided path through it, please check out my free ebook. I've included a flow chart it's clickable, and you can, learn all the chords and in a really simple, straightforward order, and learn like 10 easy songs as you do it. That's what I do with my one-on-one students. It also has everything else you need to get started, building up your rhythm, strumming, reading chord charts, and a bunch of essentials for a beginner. I also have a complete beginner's course, which takes you from absolute beginner to confident strummer. I'll put a link for that too. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to help support the channel. Otherwise, have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.